So what I've written up on here are some of the different perspectives we can come from. And when we state something, we might be stating it to be an observation, or we might be making a judgment when we state it. And same thing with someone else. If I go, in general, I think the statistics show that men are more commonly violent than women, right? Am I being sexist by saying that? Well, a person could be sexist by saying that, or they could just be saying, I'm just relaying an observation or a statistic. And of course, depending on how it's set up, it could sound like it's saying all men are that way. It could be saying that more percentage of men or whatever, right? The point is that we can add all these meaning based off of where the individual is coming from when they say it. Are they coming from observation or judgment? And then how we receive it. Someone could be making an observation and you perceive it as a judgment. Or vice versa. You could be making an observation, just stating something that you saw, and someone's like, what do you mean by that? What, blah, blah, and they get all upset, and you're like, I'm just stating something that I saw or that I heard. I didn't mean it was a good thing or bad thing. And then we have universal versus individual. So I've actually seen this happen. Here's an example. So let's just say, I'm in fitness, so I like to give that example. I go, exercise is really important to me. And this, by the way, is not actually how much I work out, but let's just say I did. Let's say I was like, every single day, no matter what, I work out for an hour a day because health and fitness is so important to me, and I just believe that I'm going to do whatever it takes to stay in shape. And since it's so important, there's just no excuse not to do it. Okay. And when you hear that, what comes up for you? And what do you think might come up for someone else? Well, I'll tell you what can come up. Probably maybe one of two common things. One thing is someone goes, cool, Derek, whatever floats your boat, dude, do what you got to do. It's not my thing, but if it works for you, more power to you. Someone else might perceive that as a prescription for them. They go, well, not everyone has an hour a day to work out. Some of us have families, some of us have jobs to do, and some of us are not obsessed with exercise, and I don't really think you need to work out an hour a day anyway, right? And it's like, whoa, wait a second. I was just saying this is what worked for me as an individual. Someone else could say, oh no, I thought that's like a universal prescription. Not consciously, unconsciously, we filter through these various dichotomies oftentimes. Now, a person who says that you got to work out, I work out an hour a day, there's no excuses, they might actually mean everyone else should do that. That might be where they're coming from. Or they might just be saying, this is just my thing, you do you, right? So then we also have conflict versus complement. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have different ideas, you could say that they conflict with one another, that they complement with one another. So for instance, if I say, if I talk about the important, let's go with health and fitness again. So I go, working out is really important. Someone else goes, yeah, but Derek, I got a business to run. I got a family to support. So what they see is that when you talk about one thing, it's conflicting with another thing. Whereas I might look at it from a perspective of complement, that no, actually being healthier helps me be more productive in my business. They actually work together. They actually support each other. Now here's the thing, both of them can be true at different points in time, just like you need to breathe to live and you don't need to breathe to live. There are times where I make a decision, I go, you know what, really I need to cut down on some of these other things I'm doing, as important as they are, and put more time on something else. But see, what happens is some people are running through life, and this is the big one, the conflict or complement, is that the versus and the either or is only looking at life through things conflict. It's either short-term or long-term. It's either observation or it's a judgment. It's either this or that. It's one or the other. You're on my side or you're against me. You're with me or you're against me. And there's a whole nother perspective that says, you know what, you can breathe and not breathe, and there might be a place for both. It can be a good thing and a bad thing. It just depends. It depends. Let's look at a very practical way of switching up your perspective that's not only going to help you better understand others, it's something you can do for yourself to come up with creative solutions. If you're ever in a dilemma, if you ever feel stuck, if you're ever like, I only have like 2 options, I don't have any good choice here, I'm kind of stuck, then here's a quadrant that's going to help explain to you your different perspectives, where other people might be coming from, where you might be coming from. So let's say if you see someone talking to a person who's paralyzed from the neck down, and they tell that person, you know what you need to do? Go ahead and raise your right arm. Does that seem offensive to you? Well, it could be, depending on where they were coming from. But remember, language is limited. There's always more subcontext. Now, what if I told you this? What if the person who's paralyzed from the neck down did raise their arm? Is this a miracle? Or am I just leaving out some further context? Well, let's consider this. If you tell a person who is paralyzed to raise their right arm, physically they can't do it, more than likely. But could they imagine themselves raising their arm? Could they visualize themselves doing it? The mental world is also a quote-unquote real world in a certain sense. So being able to visualize and imagine something has its place sometimes just like the physical world in doing something. So if I said raise your right arm in your imagination, now it makes sense. Now what if I told, if you hear someone being told to raise your right arm, what if the person who is paralyzed says, okay, no problem, and they call a friend over and say, hey, can you raise my right arm for me? They do that. What did they do? They just got help. They got someone else to do it. So we have a collective perspective. How many times in life are we thinking I can't do something, but we don't ask for help, or we don't realize it's a collective thing, not an individual thing, or vice versa? How many times are we depending on someone and not realizing what we can do ourselves, right? So it's important to be able to switch these perspectives just from a very practical standpoint. And then what about an object? What if I say, okay, raise your right arm, and so they push a button and they have like a little machine that raises their right arm up? If I say, look at the back of your head, do you go, that's impossible? Well, physically your eyes can't do it, but could you get a mirror to do it? Could you get someone else to look at the back of your head and describe it for you? You could imagine what the back of your head looks like if you've ever seen it before, right? So what's the point of this? The point is our language, every time you say something, it's limited. You always have to expand. And so what does this mean when someone else is talking, when someone else is offering their perspective, as crazy as it seems to you? To truly make peace with others and ourselves, it's got to start with, you don't have to agree with them, but you might start with this magic phrase. What do you mean by that? How do you mean? Explain that to me. You see, the biggest challenge to understanding ourselves and others a lot of times isn't about understanding logic and for-value logic and different perspectives, although that's important, but it really starts with humility. It starts with being more curious. Because what you might find is that you talk to people, even if they might be crazy, like they might be totally crazy pants, they might be totally wrong. Because from a certain perspective, it's kind of like they're saying this paper is green because their perspective is about that much. That's all they can see is their face is right here. But when you have a bigger perspective, you step back and like, there's a lot more to it than that. But if you understand why they say the paper is green, you don't have to disagree with them necessarily. You go, you know what? Okay, I see what you're saying. Have you considered this? And you bring in something else for them to consider. This is purely about effectiveness. Because if you want to bring someone into a more holistic, wider, bigger perspective, one that is going to help overcome the serious challenges in this world, like racism and sexism and the isms and the negative stereotypes and the division, and it's my people versus those people and this view versus that view. If we're going to overcome that and transcend that and make peace, the way to do it effectively is not just by yelling louder than the other person. And look, hey, there might be a place to yell and stand your ground and do all that too. And oftentimes it comes from being able to see where they're coming from and help shift their point of view. And that takes having a very deep understanding and a certain skillfulness of going, oh, wait a second, they've limited themselves to one of these little tiny bandwidths of thinking. Now, what else can I help them consider? So there's a lot more to it than this, but this will get you started. Start looking in your conversations and the arguments that you see, even things that you're not engaged in, and look at what perspective are they coming from and thinking short term, long term? Did someone make a statement that was just meant to be an observation? Someone took it as a judgment or vice versa? This person seeing only how these things work together, but not seeing the conflict, or only seeing the conflict, not seeing how they work together? All of this sort of stuff. And remember, all these perspectives can be, in a sense, valid at certain times, but they can be destructive at other times if that's all you have access to. The greatest power comes when you have the greatest flexibility of thinking, greatest flexibility of the perspective that you can take. Love to hear your comments. Please keep it about the thinking and the philosophy. This is not meant to turn into any particular debate on something. I want this video to be something that we can all use to up-level our thinking, to be more compassionate, more understanding of ourselves and of others. This is Derek Depker. Take care.